The old house on the hill had always been a source of fear for the children in the small town. Its shadow loomed over the town, casting a darkness that seemed to seep into the very souls of those who lived below. But for one group of teenagers, the house was a dare, a rite of passage, a chance to prove their bravery to each other. The group of 6 had been planning their trip for weeks, gathering supplies and mapping out the best route to the house. They had heard stories of the terrible things that had happened there, of the screams that echoed through the halls, of the ghosts that haunted the place. But they were determined to see for themselves if the stories were true. They set out early one evening, hiking up the steep path that led to the house. The moon was full and bright, casting an eerie light over the landscape. As they approached the house, they could feel the air grow colder, the atmosphere thick with a sense of foreboding. The house itself was a crumbling, dilapidated structure, the roof sagging, the windows broken. Ivy crawled up the walls, and the front door hung off its hinges, creaking in the wind. The group hesitated at the threshold, but their bravado pushed them forward. They entered the house cautiously, their flashlights casting long shadows across the walls. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, and the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. As they made their way through the house, they heard strange noises, whispers in the dark, and footsteps echoing through the halls. The group split up, each taking a different wing of the house. The rooms were filled with old furniture, cobwebs, and dust. But there was something else there too, something they couldn't quite put their finger on. A feeling of unease, a presence that seemed to be watching them. As they explored further, they began to find evidence of strange rituals, candles, incense, and symbols etched into the walls. The group started to feel uneasy, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the house. But as the night wore on, their bravado turned to fear. They heard screams, saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, and felt a cold breath on the back of their necks. Their flashlights flickered and dimmed, and the batteries drained faster than they should have. In one room, they found a book, bound in leather and written in a language they didn't recognize. The pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams, and as one of the group members flipped through the pages, they felt a strange energy lurking from the book. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and they plunged into darkness. The group screamed and banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped, and they knew that they were not alone in the house. As the night wore on, the group began to see things that defied explanation. Ghostly apparitions, demonic faces, and strange creatures that moved in the shadows. They heard whispers, saw symbols etched into the walls, and felt a malevolent presence that seemed to be growing stronger by the minute. The group huddled together in the center of the room, their flashlights casting a feeble light in the darkness. They knew that they were in grave danger, but they couldn't leave. As the night wore on, the group's fear turned to panic. They screamed and cried, begging for someone to save them, but there was no one to hear their cries. The house had them trapped, and it seemed that it was feeding on their fear. As the hours passed, one by one, the group began to disappear. They would simply vanish into thin air, leaving behind nothing but their clothes and their screams. The survivors were few, and they knew that their time was running out. Finally, there was one left, a young girl named Emily, who had been the bravest of them all. She clutched her flashlight tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she had to get out of the house, or she would end up like the others. As she stumbled through the dark halls, she felt a presence behind her. She turned, shining her light into the darkness, but there was nothing there. She heard a whisper, a voice that seemed to be coming from all around her. "Emily," it said, "stay with us. You belong here." Emily screamed and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst through the front door, stumbling down the path in the moonlight. But she wasn't alone. She could feel something chasing her, something that wanted to drag her back into the darkness. As she ran, she felt a hand close around her ankle. She fell, screaming, and looked up to see a figure standing over her. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her eyes glowing with malevolent light. "Welcome home, Emily," the woman said, her voice cold and cruel. "You belong to us now." Emily screamed and kicked, but the woman was too strong. She dragged Emily back into the house, into the darkness where she was never seen again. The next morning, the townspeople found the house on the hill, just as it had always been, crumbling and abandoned. But there was nothing different about it, something that made their blood run cold. The house seemed to be alive, to be pulsing with an energy that they couldn't explain, and they knew that they should leave it alone, to let the darkness consume it once again. But Emily's parents never gave up hope. They searched for her for years, never finding any trace of her, and they never forgot the feeling of dread that they felt when they looked up at the house on the hill, knowing that her daughter was lost inside. The house on the hill remained a mystery, a place of fear and darkness that no one dared to enter. And the townspeople told stories of the teenagers who disappeared there, of the ghostly figures that haunted the halls, and of the darkness that seemed to consume everything that came too close. But no one ever knew the truth. No one knew what really happened in the house on the hill, and no one ever wanted to find out.